Calaroga Shark Media.
In 1492, while Columbus sailed toward America, Rome was about to witness the election of the most scandalous pope in history. Rodrigo Borgia had systematically bribed his way onto the throne of St. Peter, loading mules with silver and gold to purchase the votes of cardinals. He would transform the Vatican into a den of corruption that would shock even the cynical standards of Renaissance Italy. Pope Alexander VI represented the complete moral collapse of the papal office. This man openly maintained multiple mistresses while wearing the papal tiara, fathered at least 4 acknowledged children during his reign, and conducted the business of the church as if it were a family crime syndicate operating from the heart of Christendom. This is White Smoke, Episode 31, The Borgia Pope. His daughter Lucrezia became the most notorious woman in Italy, beautiful and intelligent, but whispered to be skilled in the art of poison. His son Cesare commanded armies with ruthless efficiency, eliminating enemies through methods that would inspire Machiavelli's treatise on political power. These were not hidden scandals conducted in shadow, but open family enterprises carried out in full view of European nobility. Today we examine the reign of Alexander VI, the Pope who turned the Vatican into a criminal enterprise, and proved that papal authority could be completely corrupted by personal ambition and family loyalty. The Borgias elevated murder to a systematic practice. Dinner invitations from the papal court became objects of terror, as guests who opposed Alexander's policies had an alarming tendency to fall violently ill or simply disappear. Contemporary observers noted that the Pope's enemies possessed a remarkable propensity for sudden death, usually accompanied by symptoms consistent with arsenic poisoning. When Alexander's own son Giovanni was discovered floating in the Tiber River with his throat cut and 9 stab wounds in his body, most observers assumed Cesare had eliminated his brother as a political rival. The papal response was telling. Alexander mourned briefly, then promoted Cesare to command of the papal armies. Family loyalty, it seemed, extended even to fratricide when it served Borgia interests. Alexander treated the papacy as his personal treasury, implementing corruption on an industrial scale. Cardinals' hats were sold to the highest bidders, with prices carefully calibrated according to the wealth of dioceses involved. A single consistory in 1497 generated enough revenue to fund major military campaigns. As Alexander appointed 12 new cardinals, for fees totaling 120,000 ducats, he partitioned Italian territories among his children like a feudal inheritance, using papal armies to enforce these family land grants. Cesare received the Romagna region along with the title Duke of Valentinois, purchased from the French king for promises of papal support. Lucrezia was granted dominion over various papal cities, which she ruled through governors appointed from her household staff. The Vatican apartments under Alexander's reign hosted entertainments that scandalized even Renaissance standards of clerical behavior. Contemporary witnesses described orgies featuring naked courtesans competing for chestnuts scattered on the floor, while cardinals and papal officials wagered on the performances. These events were not secret indulgences, but official papal entertainments attended by foreign ambassadors and Italian nobility. Alexander's personal conduct violated every principle of clerical celibacy with systematic thoroughness. His primary mistress, Julia Farnese, whom Romans nicknamed the Bride of Christ, in mocking reference to her relationship with the Pope, lived openly in the Vatican and bore him children while he held the papal office. When critics complained about this scandalous arrangement, Alexander appointed Julia's brother Alessandro as cardinal, ensuring family control over church hierarchy for generations. Contemporary accounts describe how Alexander would openly fondle Julia during official papal audiences, treating the sacred office as if it were his personal pleasure palace. The theological implications of Alexander's reign were devastating for papal credibility. This man claimed divine authority to interpret scripture, issue binding church law, and determine the eternal fate of Christian souls. His decisions affected millions of believers across Europe, yet his personal behavior demonstrated complete contempt for the moral standards he allegedly represented. European intellectuals watched Alexander's papacy with growing horror and disgust. Girolamo Savonarola preached fiery sermons in Florence denouncing the monster who occupied the papal throne, comparing Alexander to the biblical beast of the Apocalypse. When Savonarola was eventually burned as a heretic in 1498, many observers suspected Borgia influence in his condemnation. Alexander's use of religious authority for purely temporal objectives corrupted the fundamental nature of papal power. When he issued bulls of excommunication against political enemies, he reduced spiritual penalties to diplomatic weapons. When he declared crusades against Italian city-states that opposed his family's territorial ambitions, he perverted the concept of holy war for personal gain. The infamous papal bull Inter Caetera, issued in 1493 to divide the New World between Spain and Portugal, exemplified Alexander's treatment of spiritual authority as a commodity to be traded for political advantage. The Pope, who had purchased his office through bribery, now sold his religious authority to Catholic monarchs in exchange for their support of Borgia territorial ambitions in Italy. Alexander's papacy demonstrated how completely the Church had abandoned its founding principles of apostolic poverty and spiritual service. While European peasants contributed their final coins to purchase indulgences promising reduced punishment in purgatory, the Pope was using church revenues to fund military campaigns designed to carve out secular principalities for his children. The contrast between papal claims and papal behavior became so stark that it undermined the credibility of Catholic Christianity itself. Priests across Europe struggled to explain how their spiritual authority derived from a pope whose personal conduct violated every commandment he claimed to represent. The scandal was not merely individual corruption, but institutional hypocrisy on a scale that threatened the foundations of religious belief. Yet Alexander's reign also revealed the remarkable resilience of papal institutional structures. Despite his personal corruption, the basic administrative functions of the Church continued to operate. Bishops were appointed, churches were built, and the machinery of ecclesiastical governance functioned even under the most debased leadership. The papacy as an institution proved capable of surviving almost any level of personal scandal from its occupants. Alexander's systematic exploitation of papal resources for family advancement created precedents that would influence church politics for generations. The appointment of relatives to church offices, the use of spiritual authority for temporal objectives, and the treatment of papal territories as family inheritance became standard practices that subsequent popes would struggle to eliminate. The international implications of Alexander's corruption extended far beyond Italy to affect European diplomatic relations for decades. His willingness to sell papal support to the highest bidder made the Church an unreliable partner in international alliances, while his use of religious authority to legitimize purely secular territorial claims corrupted the concept of divine sanction for political action. When Alexander finally died on August 18, 1503, possibly from malaria but suspected by many of poison, his servants immediately looted the papal apartments, while his corpse decomposed in the August heat. The scene perfectly symbolized his entire reign, a papacy stripped of dignity, abandoned by those who had benefited from its corruption, left to rot in public view. Even in death, Alexander's legacy continued to poison papal authority. His children's continued pursuit of power, using resources accumulated during his reign, ensured that Borgia influence would persist long after his death. Cesare's military campaigns continued until 1507, funded by wealth stolen from the Church during Alexander's papacy. The psychological impact of Alexander's reign on Catholic consciousness cannot be overstated. For 11 years, believing Christians had watched their spiritual father openly violate every principle of Christian morality, while claiming divine authority to guide their eternal destinies. The cognitive dissonance created by this contradiction would fuel religious skepticism for centuries. Alexander VI proved that papal claims to spiritual authority could become completely divorced from personal moral qualification. His example demonstrated that the most sacred office in Christianity could be occupied by someone whose behavior was indistinguishable from that of a secular tyrant pursuing power through any means necessary. The Borgia papacy became a permanent argument against the doctrine of papal infallibility, providing evidence that occupants of the papal throne could be systematically corrupt without any apparent divine intervention to prevent their election or remove them from office. This theological problem would haunt Catholic apologists for generations. Yet perhaps Alexander's most lasting contribution to papal history was negative. He established the standard by which all subsequent papal corruption would be measured. No matter how scandal-ridden later popes might become, none would match the systematic degradation of papal authority that characterized the Borgia reign. The man who should have been the moral shepherd of Christendom had become its greatest scandal, transforming the throne of St. Peter into a criminal enterprise, and proving that absolute power could corrupt even the successor of the apostles when exercised without moral restraint or institutional accountability. White Smoke is a production of Calaroga Shark Media, portions of which were made with the help of AI narration, but still written and produced by real podcasters, Mark Francis and John McDermott.